Hello and welcome to the Third Sector. I'm your host, Tamara Brinkman. In our society, there are three sectors: the public, the private, and the nonprofit, and it's that third sector that we're here to talk about today. Joining me for today's episode, we have Rachel Hughes from the Model T Ford Club of America and the Model T Museum. She's the executive director. And then later in the show, we will have Brandi Jackson, who's the executive director of development for the Ivy Tech Foundation. But to start, we have Rachel Hughes. So Rachel, welcome to the show.
Well,
thank you.
It's good to be back.
Well, yes. Well, it's good to have you back because this is, I think, the second time since we did a little baton transfer on hosting. I'm not going to, for those who have been maybe watching the show for a while, obviously you all know that Rachel was sat in this seat for many, many years, much longer than I've sat here. And we're just happy to have you join us again on the Third Sector. So let's dive right into it. Let's talk about Model T Ford Club of America, but locally, our own Model T Ford Museum that we are so lucky to have here in Richmond, Wayne County. So tell us about the museum, the club, however you want to break it up. Who started first? Which one started first? Which one came first to Wayne County?
The Model T Ford Club of America was established in 1965, so it's been around a long time.
Okay.
And it's a membership organization. We currently have nearly 5,000 members all over the world, and we have 110 chapters that are also all over the world.
Oh, wow.
So it's really neat to meet these folks and to see that the enthusiasm for the Model T isn't just something we celebrate in Indiana or Detroit, but it's celebrated all over the world. Mm-hmm. So then in 2007, they developed the Model T Museum. It started over in Centerville by Warm Glow. And then when Warm Glow wanted to expand, we had to find a new home and came to the current building that folks know as the museum, which sits on the little hill there with the parking lot. But what a lot of folks don't realize is that the museum's actually two buildings. So we have the huge building across the street, and together those two buildings house about 46 vehicles and a Pete and Pole airplane with a Model T engine in it.
That's pretty cool. I have had the pleasure of getting to go tour the museum, and I was completely surprised when we were leaving the main museum building, is what I thought, and going across the street to a whole nother building with loads more cars and mechanical space for repair and things like that. So it is quite extraordinary. There's more to it than meets the eye. There's no question about that. What is the mission of, I guess, the club and the museum, or if it's the same, or if there's a little bit of a differential, how does that link together?
In a nutshell, our mission is to preserve and promote the history of the Model T. Mm-hmm. That's the only car we focus on, not the A's, not the ones that came, before or after them, but the Model T. And we are unique in that we are the only museum in the world that we know of that focuses only on the Model T.
Okay.
And so I have the privilege of going to the National Association of Automobile Museums conferences every year. And I meet folks from everywhere, United States, England, and almost inevitably they say, oh, we have a Model T. They have one Model T in their collection of whatever else they have in their museum. And so, that also helps us to understand the importance, I think, of the Model T. Mm-hmm. Not only in the 1920s, but to the world today.
So what was the reason that, I guess, how is it that the Model T Museum here in Richmond came to just solely focus on Model T and not encompass the Model A or other ones, as you've mentioned, that other museums, have a collective of?
The museum was started by J. Clay Foth, and I know a lot of folks know him, and he actually started it with his Model Ts and then had one donated. It was a very small collection to start with. Mm-hmm. I think there were maybe 4 or 6 Model Ts at the very first site. And then when we moved to Richmond, we need a bigger building. Folks are always wanting to donate items or cars to the museum. And they quickly outgrew that one. So that was 2012. By 2018, we have moved to the building across the street and now have this amazing collection of Model Ts.
So let's curious a little bit, because we're in the state where we've got kind of a lot of younger folks coming up that are going to be the larger part of our population, and some of us that are on the other side of the number going the other way, or it's changing. So is there enthusiasm among young folks as well, or is it really how's that age or demographic work with those who tend to be enthusiasts or interested in engaging with the museum or knowledge about Model Ts?
The majority of our members are 60, 70, 80 years old. Mm-hmm. But we are working really hard to engage that next generation, actually the next two generations.
Yeah.
Because what will happen a lot of time is the Model T gets passed down. So we have folks now that are driving Grandpa's Model T.
Okay.
And so one of our goals is to involve more of the younger generation in this hobby, because it is very affordable. The Model Ts are one of the most affordable classic cars you can purchase. They're easy to work on, and there's a community that surrounds those Model Ts. And, we go on tours, it's like the Marines or whoever it was, no man left behind. If somebody breaks down, we stop.
Right.
We help that person. Generally, somebody's got the part. We do the switch out, and we're back on the road for our tours. And it's just a really, I think, a good old-fashioned hobby, where, we used to sit on the front porch with Grandma, and we used to have Sunday dinners. We don't do that so much anymore because everyone's busy. The Model T allows you to slow down, see the countryside as it's going by at 35 miles an hour.
Right.
And just celebrate that sense of community with those in the hobby.
So 2 questions. One, what's the top speed for a Model T?
35 is about top speed.
Is it 35?
Unless you have a speedster. Those can go faster. They've been modified to zoom. So. But yeah, 35 is a good speed for a Model T.
Right. And then how can you take on more Model Ts? I mean, you said you had like 46 of them now, and you're in 2 buildings. So can you continue to acquire more? I mean, do we have room for that, or is that expansion?
We are a little limited on space, but we find a way to squeeze them in. My dream is to add on.
Yeah.
Because we are continually being offered Model Ts that we don't have room to accept. And so we would love to expand our building and be able to offer more unique items that we don't have room for now.
Right. You mentioned just before that about, if something happens and you're on the side of the road or in a tour or something, everyone can kind of jump in and help out. How does that work with parts on a car that are, no more? Are the parts on a Model T somewhat universal? Do you have to go to like junkyards, collectors to get them, to work on them, to fix them? How does that work to keep them going?
There are 3 main suppliers that I know of that sell Model T parts. So you can buy new parts for your 100-year-old car still.
Isn't that something?
Yes, and that's another thing that makes the hobby fun. Sometimes you get these muscle cars and you can't find parts. You can't find the fenders anymore. They have to be recreated. But we're very lucky in this hobby that we've got 3 really well-recognized, well-respected suppliers of those parts.
Wow.
So since COVID, some of them have been a little challenging to get, but the market's starting to come back now.
Right.
So basically, if you need it, you can buy it.
Yeah.
And when you're on tour, if you need it, somebody usually has it in their car.
Isn't that something? Isn't that something? And so I mentioned, because I've seen it, and but there is a little bit of like a a workshop or workstation within the museum that folks can actually do some work on Model Ts in. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, tell us about that.
So in what we call the agency building, the building across the street from the main building, we have 3 galleries and a vintage garage. So it's set up to look like a garage might have looked back in that time, with the tools hanging on the walls or laying on the workbenches. And then we do allow members to come in, do workshops. Our local Henry's Hoosiers group has come in before and done oil changes and tune-ups and things like that.
Neat.
So it's a good way to pass the knowledge from one person to another, while also opening the museum to our members, which is, one of the things we love to do.
We only have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to a few other things. What's the staff like? Is it you? Is it you and one? I mean, the museum also has a nonprofit element to it, so that's always challenging.
Yes.
To have employees or keep them. What's your staff structure like?
The staff currently is me as the executive director. I'm the only full-time employee.
Okay.
Then we have a part-time person that does data entry, the bookkeeping, the financials, and just pitches in wherever needed.
Right.
We have a museum director.
Okay.
And then we have contracted folks that help us with special services.
Sure.
And then we have Justin, who is our senior docent. He has been around for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
He knows everything about Model Ts, and he works the weekend.
Oh, how fun. So if you want to go really learn a lot, go see Justin on the weekend, and you'll get a full-blown education on Model Ts. For folks that maybe didn't know about the museum, or are a Model T enthusiast, or just want to participate in some way, is there a way that they can engage?
Absolutely. We always need volunteer docents.
Okay.
And a docent's job is to lead tours, answer questions, keep people off the cars, and we provide that training.
Yeah.
So if there are folks out there retired or working part-time, they want a volunteer position, we'd love to talk with them. And they can reach out to us at the information that will be shown on the screen. Yeah. And would be happy to talk with them, because as you heard, we don't have a big staff. Right. So we have to count on our volunteers a lot.
So I don't want to leave today without mentioning, so you did, we've already learned that we are the only Model T museum, solely Model T museum, far as we know, and I think you'd probably know by now, in the world. And what else makes that unique is an event that you guys get to hold here that isn't held anyplace else. So let's touch on that as we get close to wrapping up our time today.
Yes. Folks will probably recall 2008 when we had the centennial and celebrated the Model T and the 100th year since the first one rolled off of the assembly line. So since then, we've been hosting what we call homecoming, and we invite the Model Ts to come home to Richmond. That is held the first Saturday of June every year. Leading up to that, we have 2.5 days of tours. So folks that come into town, they just love to drive their Model Ts, and we take them to local places to shop and visit local attractions and things like that. So that is hosted by Henry's Hoosiers and some of the area chapters that pitch in and help with that day.
So about how many people come, would you say?
This year we had about 900 people
that
came. Yes, most of those are from out of town.
Wow.
This is our way of, thanking the community. We make the museum free that day. So families that normally couldn't afford entertainment can come and have a special day with us. Yeah. And it gets our members to come too, and to meet and greet each other. Our MTFCA board comes, they all volunteer, and it's just a super day for the community to come to the museum.
Right. Well, and with 900 people coming to the community, that's bringing revenue into our community, and thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Oh, well, that's going to take us to our time with Rachel today. Stay with me. We'll be right back on the Third Sector. Welcome back to the Third Sector. Joining me now, we have Brandi Jackson. She's the Executive Director of Development for the Ivy Tech Foundation and is joining us today to talk more specifically about Ivy Cares. So Brandi, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, happy to.
Well, we're happy to have you. Okay, so just tell our audience, what is Ivy Cares and when did that start?
Okay, so Ivy Cares started about 10 years ago, and it actually began because a concerned faculty member noticed that students were in need of some external supports and worked with the director of development at the time, and they created this program called Ivy Cares, which is now across the state of Indiana at all of our locations. And it's meant to be a one-time emergency assistance for students who, are struggling with, whether it's rent or utilities or a flat tire or some kind of car maintenance that may be the difference between them staying in school or dropping out.
Okay. So Ivy Care started here at the local Ivy Tech.
Actually, I think it started in, I want to say Marion.
Okay.
But then Richmond was the second one to pick that up and notice, we really have a need here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's exciting. So, you said a little bit about what it does. Would you say that there's a mission or particular sort of pillars of focus that you align Ivy Cares with?
So the mission of the college is to provide affordable, high-quality access to post-secondary education for everyone.
Okay.
And the role of the foundation is to support the college in their mission.
Got it.
And so, supporting students with those sorts of needs allows them to meet their educational goals, whether that's, obtaining an associate's degree, a certificate in something. Yeah.
Okay. How many students or percentage of the student population do you end up supporting roughly either over the lifetime of the 10 years that Ivy Cares has been here or sort of maybe annually, whichever way is kind of easier to sort of put the numbers around, I guess. Maybe it's an estimate like each year roughly. Or...
Yeah, I would say at the Richmond campus, we probably support, I would say 30% of students who are on campus. This is not including, our online students. I would say traditional, students who are coming to campus. We support approximately 30%, and 90% of those that we support retain or are retained, meaning they continue their education or they complete.
Wow, so that's a huge impact, because that, when you say it makes the difference between them completing their whatever it is, the degree, a vocational certificate, or whether that's the associate's degree, to support 30% to get 90% of that 30% to actually end up graduating. I think that's a huge success rate. I think it's a huge illustration of the need for a program like that, because without it, that's 30% of your enrollment that potentially may not actually complete their educational process.
Right. Well, and approximately 80% of the students who come to Ivy Tech stay in the area when they complete their degree or their educational goals. And so those are people who are working here in our community, living here in our community. And so we want to make sure that they're able to complete and better the lives for themselves and their families.
Right. So that becomes more, they're thriving individuals who are really adding to the landscape in the community, and financially, if they're working, are obviously giving support back into the, just the financial picture of the community as a whole, which is wonderful.
Right.
So quick question. If you're a student doing classes let me roll this back. Can you take classes at 100% online at this point? In other words, like, can you solely be online and still get a certificate or get your AA, or do you have to be in person in some way at this point?
I think it depends on what your goal is.
Okay.
Yeah, there are some programs where you could be completely online.
Okay.
Yeah.
So part of my reason in asking that then is would online students have access or be able to get support from Ivy Cares as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
This is open to all students.
Okay.
So any student can apply, and then we have a committee on our campus that meets on a regular basis, and they
Okay.
go through those applications to make sure that the student is eligible.
Okay.
So they look at, their financial need, they look at their standing academically in
Okay.
their courses, are they attending regularly, those types of things before
Right.
they're approved.
Right.
And this is meant to be a one-time emergency kind of assistance,
Got
so just think about if I'm driving down the road, you or I, and we have a flat tire,
Yeah.
We call AAA or we call work and say, hey, we're not going to make it to that meeting. We're out $150, but we move on with our lives.
Yeah.
These students often don't have that kind of extra financial
disposable
availability.
income. Yeah, extra
right.
funds just sitting around.
So they, this is a huge hit for a lot of those students,
Yeah.
and it could mean, I've got to pick up extra hours, which means I can't finish this class that I'm in right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned that you have a committee that makes a decision. How is that governed or created? Is it all staff? Is there any student representation there at a certain level, or what's the makeup, I guess, of the decision makers of the funding?
Okay, so it is made up of staff and some of our faculty members.
Okay.
And we try to use people from all different parts of the college. So like
Okay.
our student life director is a part of that, who interacts very closely with students. Our retention director, which is how we have such great stats on where these students end up after
Okay.
we support them. One of the foundation members is a part of that committee, looking at what funds are available to support them and what the criteria are, and making sure that we're staying within those guidelines set forth by the fund. Our financial aid director is also
Okay.
a part of that, so that they can look at where they are in their financial need. And so, we try to make sure that we have all aspects represented.
Nice. That holistic
Yeah.
lens,
Yeah.
looking at everything. How does Ivy Cares get funds to support the students?
Well, fundraising. So we depend a lot on our community members to help us with that. And we actually have a lot of community members and organizations that make this a priority. It's a concern in our area. And so, for example, United Way has supported us with some grants in this area. We have individuals who make this a priority to support. And then every year we have our big fundraiser in September, which supports Ivy Cares, and that's Keys and Cocktails.
Okay.
It's a fun time, so just
Yeah.
by purchasing a ticket to that event, you're supporting Ivy Cares.
Okay, so are all the funds that are raised at that
Yes.
event specifically going to
Yes.
support the? Okay.
Yep.
Well, good.
And then every spring we have Ivy Tech Day, which
Yes.
we just did had our second Ivy Tech Day. And that is not necessarily all directed toward Ivy Cares, but it's definitely impacting students directly and can be used for some of those purposes. And so,
Right.
those are
Right.
kind of our big things.
So I know you guys are a college, so I don't know, are there opportunities for people who are not students to volunteer or support in the work of Ivy Cares, or maybe even your foundation?
Yeah, we love to have volunteers and support from the community. So, we have events where we're always looking for volunteers and people to help support us. Just talked about Ivy Tech Day. That's a way for the whole community to get involved and be a part of things. We really made an effort this last year to involve all 5 of the counties in our service area.
Okay.
And so that's a great way. We also have on the college, or in the college side, advisory boards.
Okay.
Where they're always looking for community members to serve and be a part of those. So
that's good to know. One question I thought about, so the money so obviously the Keys and the Cocktails is the big fundraiser that's here locally. Do all the funds that you raise for Ivy Cares all stays local here?
Yes.
For this campus?
Yes. So although Ivy Cares is at every campus, all 19 of them across the state, funds that are raised here in Richmond stay in our service area. So we serve Fayette, Randolph, Rush, Union, and Wayne counties.
Okay.
And so we have students from all of those counties that attend.
To support. That's great. So as we're down to our last couple of minutes, how do you do all this work? How are you governed? What's your staff like?
So it's me.
You have 50 people, right, that run around and help you do this all the time.
On the Richmond campus, I am the executive director, and then I do have a part-time assistant who is, does a lot of the back end, like entries and the data collection kind of things.
Right.
So small team here on the Richmond campus, but we do have, because that we are part of a larger organization,
right.
We have a team in Indianapolis that's there to support with some of the higher level foundation operations.
Well, that's pretty cool. As we get ready to wrap up, what brings you the most joy about what you do?
So I love interacting with people in the community and connecting people to their passions and our mission to make an impact on our students and our community and ultimately our economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I certainly learned a lot. Hopefully our viewers did as well. We're lucky to have Ivy Cares in our community and to help our students, and certainly learned a lot about the program today. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing about it. That'll take us to time for today's episode. We hope to see you next time on the Third Sector. Stay well.